Dear friends, we like to start this contemplative reading with some words of Levi Dowling from his book, The Aquarian Gospel, found in chapter 39. All things are thought. All life is thought activity. The multitude of beings are but phases of the one great thought made manifest. God is thought, and thought is God. Eternal thought is one, in essence it is two, intelligence and force. And when they breathe, a child is born. This child is love. And thus, the triune God stands forth, whom humanity calls Father, Mother, Child, or power, wisdom, love. Manas was a thought of God, formed in the image of the septenate, clothed in the substances of soul. And their desires were strong. They sought to manifest on every plane of life, and for themselves they made a body of the ethers of the earthly forms, and so descended to the plane of earth. In this descent, they lost their birthright, lost their harmony with God, and made discordant all the notes of life.
Dear friends, the ways in which people respond when confronted with spiritual awareness from universal teachings can be very different. History has shown us two different response patterns, a negative and a positive one. We may be familiar with a negative, possibly hostile, and sometimes even downright aggressive attitude. But there may also be an attitude of curiosity, perhaps a little reservedly at first, but nevertheless a response somewhat like how extraordinary this may well be, worth looking into more closely. This second response is perhaps exemplary of the typical present-day approach to life in general. In this approach, opinions must be substantiated by evidence and by a scientifically sound line of thinking. This rational, cautious approach is typical for the modern human being. Everything is, as it were, measured by the yardstick of the proverbial doubting Thomas. See first, evaluate, and only then reluctantly acknowledge it. How very different the response to the universal message will be when there is a clear, positive, profound recognition from within. Then something completely different takes place inside, a very different response from the ones mentioned earlier. When there is this responsive state of the consciousness, no matter how elementary it may be, a spontaneous, unobstructed reaction to universal teachings becomes possible. A state of consciousness sensitive to the universal truth calls up an immediate resonance from within, and this will generate a corresponding open, spontaneous, interested attitude. This positive responsiveness and its result are truly remarkable and will often go right against the grain of what is considered normal and desirable to people and society. Those who spontaneously adopt this open heart attitude can do this, of course, only on the basis of a consciousness honed by experience. Therefore, it is said, state of consciousness is state of life. When the consciousness has not experienced enough, a new development based upon the universal truth might still begin, but due to the absence of the mentioned fullness of experience, the seeker of truth will not be able to follow through. The reservations toward a true surrender to the self-initiation process will eventually turn out to be insurmountable. This is exactly why we say state of consciousness is state of life. The state of our consciousness spontaneously projects itself in our attitude to life. When sufficient experience has really permeated the human consciousness, the human being, by definition, will have become responsive to the fivefold process of self-revolution. There will then also be enough insight and yearning to want to respond to this process positively. Or in other words, there is a different inner connection to the universal principle in the innermost of our being. In the past, this connection has been symbolically called faith. That's the reason why when in the Golden Rosicrucian we speak about faith, we are not referring to a faith in an external deity, God, prophet, guru, or master. When we talk about faith, we are always referring to the principle of a new state of consciousness connected to the universal truth in our own being. So deep, true faith in this sense is not only a condition of the heart, but consists at the same time of a clear understanding. Faith in this sense is something very different from assuming anything based on an external authority. It is quite different from a belief system that one has been talked into on the basis of anxiety, worry, or fear. True faith and deep trust will always include an efficacy and vigilance of the mind. This deep, true inner faith and self-knowledge go hand in hand. On this new basis, what is deeply believed will also be deeply recognized and is deeply known from within. This process of recognition and positive acknowledgement of the universal truth has a passive side on the one hand and an active side on the other. First of all, there is always a certain necessity to be open to the influences and stirrings of the Spirit, the inner spark of the universal truth in us. Initially, this openness is, of course, first and foremost, a matter of the heart. But on the other hand, there can be no progress, no continuation of the process if the conceived spiritual influences are not immediately followed by an appropriate response, an active choice, an appropriate, active, attentive attitude of life. Heart, head, and hands must all participate in the inner realization on what has yet to take root in our being. Spiritual awareness must be put into practice, and this process by nature is based on the law of love. To receive all, to release it all, to pass it on. Those who prove to be steadfast in maintaining this attitude of inner connection, in complete self-awareness and self-surrender to the universal truth in their own being, will discover, from afar as it were, a whole new set of opportunities. For if we speak of a state of inner connection, there is also a rising light of a new consciousness in which we may discover special directives.
Dear friends, if you carefully examine that light in yourself, you will discover a series of indications concerning the means by which you will be able to realize what you have seen in this light. Pure insight, true yearning for a total self-renewal, and conscious self-surrender to the Spirit in the innermost of your being are the first three aspects of this inner process of self-transformation. This leads to, fourthly, the new attitude of life, which, owing to its power and quality, results in the opening of our entire being to the imperishable universal. The result of this is, fifthly, a new state of life, a life filled by the awareness of the universal life that permeates us all, the field of the life that extends itself beyond the veils of space and time. Whoever walks the path of the fivefold inner path will change the state of their soul, change the state of life, right down to the structural change in the cell structure. It is absolutely possible for this universal plan to unfold in our lives in every moment and no matter what external circumstances we live in. Because as a result of that deep yearning, like a magnetic call from the innermost of our hearts, the powerful full potential of universal life will be offered to us. This universal legacy is constantly offered to us by the universal and omnipresent light, so all humanity may realize in their lives its full potential. But in order to overcome our current isolation and self-centered state of consciousness and life, we must, through a deep and thorough process of self-revolution, a process that will allow our entire being to be fully attuned to the radiations of the universal spirit. And in that process, our state of consciousness will first have to be adequately attuned and prepared to the reception of, and more specifically, to the workings of the radiations of the universal spirit that will need to unfold themselves in us through the entire structure of our consciousness and our being. And this is something we ourselves need to do. We must participate in this process ourselves positively and actively. We must because we can. Based on this principle of a new consciousness that rises in us, we can take the next logical step in this process, a new attitude towards life that will finally transform our entire lives. The consciousness governs, builds, maintains the subtle energetic vehicles of our personality, and therefore also our physical body. Once a foundation is laid for the new consciousness state, when there is indeed a new spiritual activity in our system, a new life process will unfold because of the living and more from this spiritual awareness acquired inwardly. The functioning of the old egocentric consciousness will be taken over by the new spiritual consciousness. This total renewal of the consciousness will also modify the entire functioning of our energetic vehicles and also of our physical body. A functioning so different in kind that it will bring about a revival, a vivification, a rebirth of the entire human being. This is absolutely not a matter of patching up the old system, not an attempt to improve our egocentric state of consciousness in whatever way. All that belongs to the world and the reality created by this egocentric state of consciousness will remain as they are. The inner self-revolution we are talking about is a different kind of transformation. In it, human existence moves forward in the self-initiation process called transfiguration, the existential U-turn that makes possible the entire transmutation of the human energetic vehicles. Transfiguration takes place as a result of a definitive turning point, a reformation, yes, a self-revolution. Not as the result of an evolution, of a gradual process within the boundaries of our egocentric nature, not by adjusting nor improving of the I being. No, this process of transfiguration is characterized by the dynamics of a revolutionary shift. The new occurs, the old resigns. The new evolves, the old dissolves. The universal vertical inflow crosses the horizontal pattern of life, during which the process of transfiguration permeates the life system with new power lines, with another figuration. Another figure is etched into the life system. A different figure rises up in the human being. Along these new lifelines, following the laws of physics, the vertical consciousness fluids starts their workings. A new life, a new human being has arrived. It is settling in, rooting itself more and more in and through the system. In the same measure, the old personality manages to make room for the other one. Through insight, yearning, self-surrender, and a new attitude to life, a structural self-revolution is permanently instilled into our lives. That new principle of life will then have transcended the plane of our egocentric nature and its self-created prison. Thus, first comes the step of the birth of a new life principle, and then, in effect, almost immediately after, the process shifts towards the transfiguration of the entire human existence, spirit, soul, and body.
Dear friends, may the spiritual awareness generated by an opening of the heart to the universal light unfold within us, allowing us to put into practice this five-fold process of self-transformation, growing from the birth of a new consciousness right unto the transmutation of our entire being, right unto transfiguration. May we do what we are called to do, and which we all are certainly capable of doing. Dear friends, when nature and essence of matter is converted into soul energy, and the nucleus of the being of the soul is returned to one, then humanity has become God. May it be so.